Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the eMLB Insider Podcast. My name is AnjouPays, the GM of the St. Louis Cardinals, and joining me is my illustrious co-host, back from the busyness of the CBA news that broke, JR, Jay Rollins, 28th, the GM of the Reds. How you doing, JR?
Pretty good, Andrew. Good to be back. Thanks to Cody for filling in for me last week. We're ready for spring training to get underway here soon, so ready to get back to some eMLB action as well.
So have things for those of you that don't know, JR actually works in well, can you call it the front office, or you're working, is it considered the front office in your position?
We still consider the everybody who works full time in the front office there. So I'm senior director of communications for the Reds in real life, GM of the Reds in eMLB. So
Yeah,
I have a vested interest in both spots.
that's right.
Um, it was obviously a little bit hectic in my real life as soon as the lockout ended and we had the agreement in place. So I had to bow out of last week's recording, but thankfully now we're starting to get back to normal a little bit. The flurry of transactions across baseball is slowly dying down, and thankfully games are about to start back up.
I mean, you say that, but I feel like there were more transactions that happened today and yesterday than it happened like at the very beginning, because you have, was it Chapman being traded to the Jays today? You
Yeah,
had
yeah.
the Reds made their third trade since the lockout today with was it Amir Garrett for Mike Minor, and Schwarber signed with the Phillies, Bryant signed with the Rockies. Like, this stuff ain't slowing down right now. Because people are trying to like make sure that players have enough time to get acclimated with their team before the regular season starts, and they have finally released the full adjusted schedule. A lot of double headers. That's going to be interesting, and they're not 7 inning double headers this year, so that'll be interesting to see. But enough about IRL baseball. We're here to talk about the eMLB, brought to you by the Fluffy Kitty Ninja Network. Commish LB, who is now a Twitch partner. Congratulations to Commish LB. Well deserved Twitch partnership. If you aren't following his channel, please go twitch.tv/FKN Commish LB. That is where all the magic happens for this universe. We're just talking about what happens on his stream. Honestly, we're just kind of adding extra information, but the show really happens on his Twitch channel. So make sure you check that out. Drop him a follow. Hang out in the stream. Create your own player that can be in this universe as well. If you collect your balls of yarn, which are the channel points in that universe, over there on Twitch. So make sure you guys check that out if you haven't done so already. But once again, congratulations to Commish on achieving Twitch partner within being out of the park baseball being his main game. That is not something that's very common. So very well deserved. A lot of hard work went into this. So congratulations once again. So we are now in mid to late May now. It's the 22nd technically. So what we're
Yeah.
covering this week, once again, we had another schedule adjustment in terms of when we're doing the simulations because of Commish's busy schedule. Obviously, he's got priorities. He's got a family. He's got work. So another adjusted schedule. So we're covering technically the last 2 weeks of games, but it's half of 1 week, then one full week, and then another 4 days into the current week. So we are in the middle of a week in May, but it's technically 2 weeks worth of games. And starting from May 8th up until May 21st is where we're looking at these games right now. And as we look at the current standings, going division by division here, the Red Sox are maintaining their AL East lead by 3.5 over Tampa Bay. Tigers have increased their lead over the Indians and White Sox. They lead their division by 5 over the Indians. We have a new leader atop the AL West as the Los Angeles Angels drop from first to third in the division this sim after strong performances by the Texas Rangers and Houston Astros. Rangers sit atop of the division a game and a half up on the Astros. We had a switch in the NL East as well, as the Phillies have overtaken the Nationals by half a game. The Cardinals have extended their lead by quite a bit in the NL Central. They're now the only team over 500 in that division, a 9.5 game lead over Milwaukee. And then the NL West, we had another change as well with the San Diego Padres hopping over the Colorado Rockies by 4.5 games after this sim. So, JR, what stands out to you as we are now late in May, beginning to flip the calendar over to June into the summer months?
You know, the most eye-popping thing to me, you know, and we talked about this early in the season and wondered if it would keep up, was in the NL Central. I really, you know, I thought you had put together a really good Cardinals team there, but I'm really surprised to see, you know, at this point in the season, you know, that race really not being a race at all. And I mean, you know, you're really starting already to, you know, to put some major distance, you know, between yourself and, you know, even, you know, a team like the Brewers, who we thought maybe had an outside chance of competing, and, you know, the Pirates, you know, I hate to say it, just, I mean, you know, at this point, I think you'd have to say they're the most disappointing team in the league, you know,
Mm-hmm.
being at the bottom of that division when, you know, we all looked and saw, coming off a season where they won the division, having so much young talent coming back, that, you know, you really thought that they were still going to be a contender there. So that sticks out to me. You know, I am surprised also to see Philly at the top of the East.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, you know, especially after Machado's injury in the preseason. I don't know that very many people had high expectations for them. You know, we were all still talking about Washington and Atlanta, you know, really competing for that division. Um, Again, it's, you know, it's still late May, so there's still, you know, plenty of baseball left. But you know, Philly there could really play spoiler if they're able to keep playing that well.
Yeah, and to your point about the disappointing Pirates, though, they've started a turnaround as of late. They've won 7 out of their last 10, but because of the rough first month of the season that they had quite a big hole to dig out of. They're making progress with this 7 out of their last 10, but like you mentioned, it's a deep hole to climb out of. Excuse me. And honestly, Milwaukee was doing a good job of keeping within striking distance of the Cardinals until this sim. They went 4-9 across the games that happened in since our last podcast, which dropped them below 500. And that coupled with the Cardinals going 10-2, honestly, I did not expect my team to be performing this well. I really didn't. I thought it was going to be a close race between myself, Milwaukee, and Pittsburgh for the Central. I did not think I'd have the best record in baseball because you have teams like the defending World Series champion Angels. You have teams like the Rays, the Tigers, the Nationals, who are always up there for competing for World Series. I thought those would be the top teams, and that myself, the Brewers, and Pirates would beat each other up trying to get to that NL Central count. Because I remember I won the NL Central 2 seasons ago after like a really good fight with your Reds, and when I won the wild card last year, I actually had a better record when I won the wild card than I did when I won the NL Central. So I knew I figured the NL Central would just clash with each other, but it's a little disappointing to see the Brewers and the Pirates struggling a little bit here. Like I said, Pirates could be back on the rise, but they're still at the bottom. Another team that's surprising me at the bottom of their division are the Dodgers. Um, it was talked about on the preseason podcast that was actually on Commission's Twitch channel that the Dodgers were potential contenders for the NL West with the Padres and the Diamondbacks, and they're sitting there at the bottom of their division. They have actually the only team that has fewer wins than them are the New York Yankees. And oh no, sorry, the A's do too. But they're a little bit of a surprise too. They've won their last 10. They went 1-9. That's really rough for a Dodgers team that was preseason expected to compete for that NL West. But there's still a lot of season left. We're only 2 months in. We still got the dog days of summer, as everyone calls it around baseball, where things could really change in a heartbeat. So we'll keep an eye on everything, but a couple of surprising moves so far for sure. Some of the top news, though, as we move into the sim, speaking of the Pirates, I don't know if this is because of their rough start or because there's actually been talk of this, but Franchi Cordero apparently is wanting a trade out of Pittsburgh. He's a right fielder for them, right? I know he's an outfielder. I didn't know if he was right or left.
Yeah, I think he plays both corner spots really.
Yeah, he can play.
More
He
a
can
little
play
more
both.
right field.
He's
Yeah.
listed as a right fielder, but he can play both corner spots. Um, but it's looking like he's now moved into a bench role in the Pirates lineup after being one of their main piece. That he was one of their main pieces in 2023, but kind of fell off in production in 2024 and has now moved into a bench role in 2025. So he's not happy in Pittsburgh, but you got to think it's kind of his own fault. Like he's not performing to the standards that he set in 2023 to be that starting right fielder. And with his contract, I mean, it does expire at the end of this year, but it's 15.6 million. So you got to think it might be hard for another team to pick that up, especially at the production he's getting. So, uh, I don't. He may want out, but it may be really difficult for Pittsburgh to move him.
Yeah, and I feel like Cody is had kind of recognized that a while ago and was trying to move him at different points last season and in the off season, knowing that he had Rob Stratton coming along, Barry Bonds Jr., knowing that he was going to be available soon, Brendan Trevino. They've had options coming up there. Even going back to when they had Judge Dozer before they traded Judge away, and it just seems like that Franchi has never really kind of lived up to that contract that he had when he came over. And to be honest, like you said, I think he's had plenty of opportunity to try to prove himself. Even if you look at this year, some of those other guys haven't really performed all that well.
Mm-hmm.
And if he had been able to start off well himself, he could have very well gone back into a starting role in place of a couple of those guys. But if everybody's struggling, you're going to give the opportunities to the younger guys.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Rob Stratton is not playing well either. He's actually got worse numbers across the board than Cordero, but they're giving the time to the youngster, as you mentioned, as opposed to the 30-year-old with an expiring contract, because they're trying to get Stratton ready to they're wanting him to step up because they're going to keep him around longer. Um, you think the Pirates might be regretting the Judge Dozier trade now with the production of their outfield?
They might. I mean, I, I thought it was awfully early to kind of move him on. Um, I know they really liked Spitzer. I think it was Spitzer that they got the infielder, the shortstop to come over.
Yep.
But again, they already had Alejandro Pa there as well, who was a strong middle infielder.
And
So
maybe they were looking for an offensive upgrade over Nasim Nunez, who was really just a defense first guy. But I don't know. You
yeah,
figured they already had strong potential in the middle infield. So
that that's what really surprised me a little bit heading into this year was just that coming off a year where they were so successful with Nunez and Arias up the middle, and those guys seemed to play really well. That there was kind of some thought there to do some tinkering and moving that around. And again, I know everyone's always trying to kind of get ahead of things and make a move before it's too late. But I thought that was a real strong component of their division-winning team last year, and was a little bit surprised to see some tinkering there.
yeah, so we'll keep an eye on Cordero, see if he can either uh, improve his production or if the Pirates are able to find someone to be a trade partner with, maybe someone you can attach prospects to for someone to just take on the contract for the rest of the year. But we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But he's not the only person that's unhappy and is looking to be traded. Another NL Central player, Giancarlo Stanton, first baseman for the Cubs. And yes, for those of you that know real life baseball, yes, I said first baseman Giancarlo Stanton for the Cubs. um, he is also asking for a trade. Again, someone who is not performing well, someone who is actually got an even larger contract than Cordero. He's being paid 32 million this year, 19 million next year. He is also asking for a contract, and you got to think this is even less likely than Cordero moving, because Stanton is really at this point in his career at 35 years old. He's just there for his bat. He's not going to be someone you put in defensively. He is a pure designated hitter at this point. which is probably why he's listed as a first baseman, because that's the most likely position he would play. But when he's batting 125, slugging 292 across the season so far. Now, he's not gotten consistent playing time. He's only done that over 17 games. That's going to be a tough pill for any team to try to trade. You have to attach prospects to him if you're going to move him.
Yeah, and it looks like that he's been playing kind of more of a platoon role this year. Him and one of their youngsters, Danny White, a first base prospect that Chicago really likes. He had a strong kind of debut month in 2024, and so they've got him and Stanton platooning a little bit there at first. And White's done okay in his role, but yeah, Stanton has struggled so much. With the Cubs, they're probably fortunate that they have the money that they can kind of absorb that contract, and they are sort of in a rebuilding spot to where you'd like to think that a veteran like that maybe could help some of the young guys along, but if he's going to be frustrated and he's going to be wanting to get out of there and want more playing time, now you're really in a tough spot because you really can't justify giving him playing time, obviously, over your young players. And to your point, there's not going to be anybody that's going to take him on without you attaching something to him. So then to keep him around being frustrated is probably not going to help matters either.
I mean, off the top, there are not many teams that have the budget space to take on a $32 million contract.
Right.
Unless you send another bad contract back, which for the Cubs, not going to lie, they have a lot of really expensive contracts that maybe aren't the best contracts. They're retaining $17 million of Arenado's contract, and he's not even playing with the Cubs anymore. He's playing for division rival Milwaukee, and they're paying $17 million of that contract. So you got to think they're probably going to try to make moves to get some of these contracts off the books. Like they have 3 players over the age of 35 that are making at least $22 million. And Didi Gregorius, Craig Kimbrell, and Giancarlo Stanton. So you got to think they need to start making some financial decisions that will help cut some of that payroll. Now, after those few, well, I mean, you also have Fultonavich and Honeywell making quite a bit of money. After that, it makes more sense. But that Stanton contract's got to hurt right now. Gregorius is playing pretty well. He's playing about what you expect him to play, and Kimbrell is one of the best closers in the league. So you can't deny that they're probably worth. Well, maybe Gregorius isn't worth it, but he's at least serviceable in your lineup as opposed to Stanton struggling right now. So we'll see how those play out.
Yeah, and you can stomach it a little bit while you're playing a bunch of youngsters who are making more around the league minimum, but anybody is gonna have a tough time swallowing that much money for somebody hitting that poorly.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, the Cubs financially can handle it. They've got a good fan base around them. Hopefully, the fan base doesn't start losing hope in them though, because they're another one of those NL Central teams that are struggling. I don't know if anyone really expected them to compete this year because of all the young talent that they have. They're still trying to develop it, but they still have a lot of old players that are taking up quite a bit of payroll. So it's tough to make moves to supplement the young players as a result. A little bit of happy news moving on from those trade demands. We mentioned last time we had a player in Jose Ramirez hit his 300th home run of his career, and we have yet another player that has also hit his 300th home run, and that is Mookie Betts of the Boston Red Sox. Hit his 300th home run on May the 10th in a win over the rival New York Yankees. Yeah, that's got to feel good to hit a milestone home run against your division hated rivals. He is at the age of 32. Has fairly consistently hit 30 home runs. He had one season where he hit 22, and last season he hit 29, so he almost hit 30. So maybe he gets to 400. It just depends on how his power progresses. But if he continues hitting over 300 like he is right now, you can take a little bit of power reduction in his career.
Yeah, that might not be the only milestone for him this year. He's he's very likely to get to 1,000 RBIs here soon. And he also has, a decent chance if he keeps up this hitting pace of getting to his 2,000th career hit by season's end, or at least very close. So, for a superstar of Mookie's caliber who's still playing well at 32, I think he still has a lot of baseball left. This is not going to be the last milestone he hits for sure.
He's definitely one of the keys to the division leading Boston Red Sox right now. The only player that has a better WAR than him is second baseman James LeBlanc on his team, who is having a monster year at the plate, batting 340. But that's not the news story. This is about Mookie Betts. Congratulations, Mookie, on your 300th home run. And we'll see if he can keep that going and keep leading the Red Sox. Try to stave off the Rays and the Orioles that are fighting for that AL East division. Couple of contract news. The Baltimore Orioles made a couple of extensions. They lock up a couple of their. Are they both pitchers? I know. Wait. No, I need to look at this again. I need to find the players. Michael Busch, their first baseman, and Khalil Lee, their right fielder, 27 and 26 years old, respectively. Michael Busch is going to be extended for 4 years past this current one at an average of $11 million a year. And had to do the quick maths in my head. Khalil Lee has been extended for 2 years with a player option for a third, averaging about $16 million a year. So those are a couple of cornerstones in that Orioles lineup. And just for the people that aren't familiar with the rules, we do have specific rules to this universe that aren't necessarily a part of the regular Major League Baseball. Each team is allowed to have 4 contract extensions per year. If you use 4, anyone else that its contract has expired, you have to let them hit free agency. It's one of the things that we have in place to help some turnover happen within rosters. So he's used 2 of his 4 in one fell swoop here. Do you think these are good extensions, or do you think they could have waited?
The Michael Busch extension, I think, he was able to get Busch last year, claimed him off waivers from the Marlins, and he ended up having a really good, strong year for the Orioles. So that turned out well, and he started off strong here. So, locking him up is a good call. That it doesn't look like they really have kind of that first base type coming up through their minors. That's one of their top prospects. So I kind of like that move. The Khalil Lee extension is a little more interesting. That was one trade in the offseason. They got him from Kansas City for Chen Feng Chen. And I think, there was some discussion at the time about it being a risk, giving up Chen after having a solid year, being a young guy for Lee, who was coming into the last year of a deal, and whether they would be able to extend him, whether he would pan out and be somebody they could count on. He started out the season okay. He hasn't really lit things on fire or anything. He's been solid, but I think Brendan probably is just starting to think that if these 2 solid guys, he can get locked up. Alex Verdugo has hit very well, and so he's starting to kind of align some pieces there around Nick Spence and Buster Bluth, and trying to fortify that lineup to go along with the pitching staff that we've all talked a lot about that we like. So we'll see what happens with the lead part of it. I'm still not totally sold on him being a long-term answer there, and maybe not being able to find some better value than that. But I think the Busch move was a good one. He seems like a late bloomer who's playing well for them.
Well, you also have to think, I don't know if you realize this, Ching Feng Chen is now currently playing for the AA team in Kansas City. He has already been moved back to the minor leagues after a poor start to his season. So you have to think Orioles might have gotten the better end of that deal. Now, it might have been a quick move by the Kansas City GM to move him back down, because it was only 15 games into the season where they moved him back down, and not even to AAA, dropped him down to AA. So we'll have to keep an eye on Chen to see what happens with him. But you have to think, if you have him sent back to the minors and you and the Orioles felt confident enough to lock, oh gosh, I'm blanking, to lock Lee up for two, potentially 3 more years. You have to think right now, Baltimore might have the better end of that deal because at least he's contributing at the major league level. So we'll see if Chen can make his way back to the majors and have an impact on that Royals team. But it looks like Baltimore might have won that deal right now, just based on what's happened since the start of the season. So it could completely flip around. Who knows?
Yeah.
And in other roster-related news, the GM of the Los Angeles Angels, who have recently found themselves struggling, especially when it comes to their starting pitching, their ERA, if I remember correctly, their starting rotation ERA is one of the worst in the AL, if I remember correctly. Let me double check that. Their starters ERA is 12th in the league right now. And they announced that they are making a change to their starting rotation. They have added in Francis Martes, who was a free minor league free agent signing this offseason, made the roster out of spring training in the bullpen after a strong spring performance, and has now taken a spot in the rotation instead of Jim Silla. So Jim Silla right now is sitting at a 7.54 ERA, while Francis Martes has a 2.1 ERA. In his one start since being added to the rotation, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't great. He gave up 3 runs over 6 innings. He had struggled with his command, though. He gave up 6 walks, only had 3 strikeouts. But you have to think that kind of performance is a little bit better than the 5, 6, 6 runs that Jim Silla gave up in his last 3 appearances, his last 3 starts. So maybe this will help spark an LA resurgence after a rough couple weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, it's worth a try. And when you've got a guy through 7 starts that has an ERA over 7, and you're in a tight division that every game really counts, I think you have to try something. Even in my position with the Reds, one of my starters who's been in the rotation for couple seasons now, Leon Richardson, has just started out awful, and I wanted to try to give him as many chances as possible to turn it around, but at a certain point you gotta make the call. So I don't blame Tom, the GM there for the Angels for making the call at this point to shake things up. He also just, regardless of who's filling out that spot in the rotation, if they're gonna really take it to the end, they definitely need more out of Jacob deGrom.
Mm-hmm.
They need him to step up. Ohtani has been okay as a starter, but definitely not up to par from what we've seen from him before. So they're going to need those 2 guys to really step up, regardless of who else is filling out the other spots in the rotation.
I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I'm going to say that the Angels are going to make one of the big trades at the trade deadline, and they're going to try to add a rotation piece. I think
that wouldn't surprise me either.
Because you look at the rotation, like you mentioned, deGrom is underperforming. Ohtani, you have to think, is underperforming from a pitching standpoint. Greg Briggs is doing well. This is the prospect that they got in return in the Joe Adell trade. He's actually probably been their best consistent starter, but even then, he's got a 4.12 ERA. Now, you're never going to take Ohtani out of the lineup, but pitching-wise, unless Francis Martes continues his strong performances, your other piece is Joe Swanda, who isn't gonna do anything for you in a big way. So I think the Angels might be one of the teams, especially since they're looking to defend their World Series championship. They might be a team looking for a starting rotation piece around the trade deadline. So maybe something to look out for as we get into the summer months. Speaking of trade rumors, perfect segue into our next segment. The GM of the Toronto Blue Jays put in a news story in our Discord. By the way, if you want to follow in on GM news, player news, discussions between the community creator players, be sure to join the Discord. Link is going to be in the description of this video. The Toronto Blue Jays GM noted or made the league aware of the strong start of their closer and how through the first 7 appearances for him, he had yet to give up a run. And that would be Travis Berg, the 31-year-old closer. Now, he has since then given up a couple runs, but he does have 14 saves. There is rumors that Bergen might be one of a trade piece for Toronto. And Toronto, as as going into the season, we knew that they were in a rebuild mode. They were trying to make trades to offload some of their large contracts, such as Woodford. They're keeping their core in terms of Vladimir Guerrero and Danny Kelly's making his major league debut, or did he make it last? No, it's major league debut this year. What teams do you think might be interested in someone like Travis Bergen? Do you think he is someone that could be moved? Or do you think this is something that Toronto's like, he's playing better than we expect, maybe try to maximize his value now?
Yeah, Bergen's an interesting reliever because I believe Harris in the past has tried to move him, and he and I frankly have had discussions in the past about Bergen. I really like him as a lefty who can be a closer or can be a setup guy because he can get both right-handers and left-handers out. We never came to an agreement on it, partly just from where our my team was at and everything. But so I've been a little bit surprised that he hasn't been able to move him. We're going to get into some injury talk here shortly, and
That's true.
Definitely one of those teams that has suffered a big injury could be a team that's interested in with the Rangers. But a strong reliever like that would always seem to me to be a piece ideal to move at the deadline when a team is looking to fortify its bullpen, especially as a lefty. So I'm actually surprised that he hasn't been able to move him in the past. But I think if he continues this strong play, he'll absolutely get moved to some contending team that needs to fortify their bullpen. There's a couple teams right now that probably would like to do it before we get too deep into the season.
Yeah, and you look at his stats, he has consistently in his career been above a 10 strikeout per 9 pitcher. So he is 100% a strikeout left-handed pitcher, even though he only throws 91, 93 miles an hour, which I think was interesting. Doesn't have a ton of movement, but he's good at his pitches, even though they're not overpowering stuff. And the thing that really gets my attention this year is he is walking less than 1 batter per 9 this year. If he keeps that up, that is extremely valuable, especially out of the bullpen. If you can limit walks and get strikeouts at such a high rate that he's doing, that's a scary piece out of the bullpen. But the question is, can he keep that up? So we'll definitely keep an eye on Bergen. But there is also some trade rumors that hasn't really come to light in our Discord yet. But would you like to talk about it?
Yeah. So if I put on my Jordan Cage reporter cap,
Ooh.
I would say that sources inside the Reds front office are saying that catcher Tyler Stevenson could be entering his final days as the starting backstop for the Reds. The team has been looking to potentially move him for a little while now, partly to make way eventually for Forrest Heiter to pop up and be the starter there. Also to clear a little money financially to help out toward the end of the season. But there's a strong chance that Tyler Stevenson could be on his way to an AL contending team.
Ooh, spicy rumors. I didn't know you were going to get this detailed on me.
Yeah, so again, there's nothing is official until the commissioner's office has signed off, but all signs point to Tyler Stevenson having a new home following our next sim.
All right, because I'm not going to ask you this direct question, so I'm just going to try to speculate myself who this team could be this AL contending team. Obviously, you know the answer because you're the GM. So I'm not. You're not going to divulge this information. So I'm just going to talk to myself basically and try to speculate who I think, as I'm trying to pull up the standings here, who I think would have a need at catcher. It's definitely not Detroit. Detroit has Keibert Ruiz. There's no way that Detroit is going to be trading for Stevenson. Let's see. Let's look at Boston. Boston could have a need at catcher. They do not actually. They have a pretty weak in terms of catcher right now. Both of their catchers on their roster have negative WAR right now in Christian Vasquez and Hunter Fiducia. So that could be one. You could also, let's see, Tampa Bay, who traded away Keibert Ruiz, could have a need at catcher because they don't have Ruiz anymore. The Indians have Bo Naylor. I think they're probably happy with him and Wilson Contreras splitting time. They're probably okay there. White Sox have Adley Rutschman. There's no way they're going to try to go for him. Texas has Danny Jansen and Eduardo Rodriguez. They're probably good. The Astros have Grayson Rowan and Patrick Bailey. That ain't happening. Those two catchers could start anywhere. And the Angels have Tomoya Mori. So my guess is between Boston and Tampa Bay. It's one of those two teams. That's going to be my guess. But hey, what do you guys think it could be? It's an AL contending team. So my guess is either the Red Sox or the Rays. I guess we'll see maybe in the next sim what trade that is. So next podcast, look for us to discuss what actually happens in this deal. Because it looks like it's almost said and done, just has to be approved by the commissioner's office. So
yeah, sources say an agreement is in place.
Agree. Okay, there. See, those are the words I was looking for. I wasn't going to try to pull it out of you, but I got it out of you. So terms have been agreed to, and it's just waiting on the approval of the commissioner. So look for that to happen. In the Discord, we'll probably see an announcement after the sim on Friday, if that's the case. Which this podcast is either going to go up Thursday or Friday. Not sure. It depends on when I can edit it. But then we will definitely discuss the details of that trade on the next podcast. So look forward to seeing that. All right, moving into some injury news. We have a much shorter list now than the last two podcasts. We've got 3 that we're going to talk about. One of them has an attached story to it that we think is really interesting. So Brandon Nimmo, center fielder for the Mets, recently got an oblique strain and missing 3 weeks. It's now down to 2 weeks because it happened in the middle of the week during the sim. But as a result, Mets GM Denbrew called up center fielder Billy Anderson, a 2023 draft pick. Keep in mind we're in 2025 now. A 2023 draft pick straight from single A baseball. Not even high A. Straight from mid-level A ball. Directly to the majors to fill in Nimmo's spot while he is out. And JR, I'll let you speak on this first, and then I'll give my thoughts. I have specific thoughts behind this. I want to hear what you think first.
Yeah, it's a little surprising move to dip that far down to bring somebody up for such a short period of time. I think that's the part for me. If Nimmo was going to be out the remainder of the season or a couple months, and you felt like, all right, we're going to take a young guy who we feel like is on the fast track, a 2-month run at the big league level and see how that goes, I think it would make a little bit more sense. I'm surprised in that short of a window that they wouldn't have gone with just one of the veteran outfielders they have maybe at AAA or even their number 3 prospect overall is a center fielder, Sergio Fajardo, who is actually at high A, performing okay at high A, but that could have been an option as well. But even that, I would have probably had the same feeling that if it's only for 2 to 3 weeks, that I would go with more of a veteran. So bold move. Maybe you strike lightning there, and the kid comes up and does well, and you really found something. But definitely a little bit of surprise.
Yeah, you have to wonder do you think that, like, my question is, why start the service time clock on someone that young who hasn't any experience above high A ball in his career? Why bring that guy straight to the majors and go ahead and start his service time clock when you're potentially going to send him back down once Nimmo comes back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks at the time, but I will point out this: since he got injured, Nimmo got injured on May 14th. May 14th was a win against the Dodgers. Was a contributing factor to the Dodgers' poor sim. It swept them in 4 games. But since that point, from the 15th to the 21st, the Mets are 5-1 in that span. I don't know if it's because of Billy Anderson, because before that point they had won 3 straight against the Dodgers. They just won the 4th game of that series and then took 2 out of 3 against Colorado and have taken the first 2 against Washington. They'll play a 3rd game the first day of the next sim. But they were also coming off getting swept by the Padres in 4 games. So I don't know. Maybe this was a spark plug scenario, but I mean, he's not playing horribly. Well, he's only played in 2 games technically. He's gotten on base a couple times, hasn't gotten a first big league hit, but he's got an RBI and scored a run. So it's not like he's the bona fide starter there. So you have to wonder, why start the clock on Billy Anderson? Not only did they bring him up to the majors, they're not using him that much. Maybe he's just a bench spark plug that's kind of, I don't know, because they've won since losing Nimmo. I don't know. It doesn't add up. So interesting story to be sure. We'll see Nimmo back in a couple weeks. We'll see what happens with Billy Anderson, but I think both JR and I agree. It's interesting to see starting the service time clock on Billy Anderson so early in his career when he hasn't hit above. He played a little bit of high A in 2024. But was sent back down to single A. Now, to his credit, he was raking at mid-level A ball. He was batting .382 with a .618 slugging percentage, 7 home runs, 31 RBIs across 35 games. But does that maybe that warranted a call straight to the majors? Who knows? But we'll see how he does. But his service time has started. He's a part of that 40-man roster now. Hopefully, it wasn't too soon. Hopefully, it didn't stunt his growth. So we'll keep an eye on Billy Anderson's career moving forward. The next 2 injuries are backbreakers for their respective teams. Probably 2 of the most major injuries that we've had since the spring training injuries that we talked about first on the first podcast of the season. We'll talk about Texas first. Texas, who is on the rise lately, now taking over the AL West from the Angels after a strong 10 wins, 3 loss sim, has lost one of the best closers in the league, Demarcus Evans, for the rest of the season. And he has enacted the insurance policy to save money on his contract. But here's the interesting thing. Before this injury, he was actually listed. There were actually trade rumors surrounding Demarcus Evans. The GM of the Rangers, Jamie, had listed a bunch of relievers on the trade block, including Evans. Now, obviously, Evans ain't going to be traded. Do you think that they were actually seriously considering a trade for Evans, or were they kind of playing some smoke and mirrors game, but still going to keep Evans at the back of their bullpen? And how do you think this injury affects them moving forward after they've taken that first place spot in the West?
Yeah, it's a tough blow. I mean, you mentioned how good Evans was. He was the AL reliever of the year in 2024. One of the top-notch guys. It's interesting that they were entertaining trade offers. I tend to think, Jamie seems to like to deal from depth and kind of gauge what interest is out there for some of his guys, and he's not necessarily afraid of moving a talented guy to kind of address depth somewhere else. So I think he was seriously entertaining offers. Again, we're talking about a closer who, there had been no extension signed for him. He was entering his final year of arbitration this year. He's actually, his arbitration 1-year deal is over $21 million.
That's his estimate.
No, for the season he's making now. So
that's right, because his salary was adjusted after the insurance policy. That's right.
Yeah, so you're talking about they had plenty of opportunities if they really wanted to keep him for the long term to try to sign him to a long term deal. So, I think he really was seriously looking to potentially shop him around. And so now, not only does that affect their team, I think they've got a rookie that's kind of taken over the closer spot, and Mike Haggard. We'll see how well he does, but I think this is also going to be interesting to see how much, if any, this will affect Demarcus Evans in the offseason come free agency time. People wondering how he's going to bounce back from it, because before this injury, if he had another strong season like that, he's easily the top relief pitcher on the market heading into the offseason, with it seeming like Texas really wasn't interested in signing him to an extension. So he would have been somebody very heavily pursued at the deadline, I would assume. And so it'll be interesting to see where things take him once he recovers.
Do you think that Texas might now think about an extension because they weren't able to trade him before his contract expired, like they were potentially planning to do?
It could be. It could be that if they feel like they can get a discount for it, but at the same time, if you're Demarcus Evans, and you feel like you probably deserved an extension after the seasons you've had, and to be taken to arbitration in that final year, he may not want to even entertain the idea of an extension. Maybe that could even be why they haven't. We don't necessarily know what those negotiations may have been like. There may have been a point in the offseason where things broke off, and both sides just went in opposite directions. So
But we can only speculate what's going on behind closed doors in Texas. But as you mentioned, it's an area of depth for them. Like you mentioned, Mike Haggard stepping up into the closer role. They have a lot of solid relievers, including Julian Fernandez, C.D. Pelham, Bobby Wall, J.J. Zolo. So they have the talent in the bullpen. So if any team is able to withstand the loss of Evans, Texas is one of those teams that can do so. But like you said, it'll be more interesting to see how it changes the dynamic of Texas's offseason, since they aren't going to be able to trade Evans for any return during the season before his contract expires. So that'll definitely be interesting to see. And then the last major injury was to a promising rookie of the year candidate. This is a real disappointing one. The youngster from Kansas City, Jorge Barboza, who was having a phenomenal start to his career, goes down with a partially torn UCL, will be out for at least a year, so he won't even be ready for the start of next season. Was absolutely tearing it up with a 2.13 ERA across 7 starts, had a 3-3 record, was allowing, he had an under 1 whip, which is fantastic, only allowing under 3 walks per 9, and having over 11 strikeouts per 9. This kid was on the fast track to the rookie of the year, and to see him go down with an injury that'll keep him out for a year plus is heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. He was somebody that I really thought could have pulled off the double play, being rookie of the year and potentially the Cy Young winner.
Ooh,
in
yeah.
the AL. And to me, the idea of him really being a horse at the head of that rotation was kind of Kansas City's shot at being a spoiler, whether it was for the division or for a wild card. And I just I still think there's a lot of good young talent on that team, but without Barboza really leading the charge in that rotation, I just have a hard time seeing them really make that run. It looks like they brought up Cal Maduro to kind of take his spot, who again is another phenomenal pitching prospect, but it seems like he's not quite there yet. He's still in the development phase to getting to that ace caliber that I think a lot of people see in him. And so it's another exciting prospect for the fans in Kansas City, but in no way can he come in and fill Barboza's shoes.
I will say though, Maduro's first ever big league start with since being called up to replace Barboza, 6 innings, no runs, 5 strikeouts, no walks. So that's a pretty impressive debut performance for Maduro. Now, he did give up 7 hits, but he was able to limit the damage to nothing. He
Yeah.
is now a perfect 1-0 in his career. So hopefully he can keep that up because, like you said, he's got some big shoes to fill. Um, but yeah, Cal Maduro is, like you said, he's another prospect that was looking to crack the major leagues. Maybe would have wanted to wait until next year, but sometimes injuries force the hand of the manager, and they're giving Maduro his shots. His through one start looks good so far. But let's see if he can keep that up moving forward. But best wishes goes out to Barboza because to start his career as shining as he has, go down like this is definitely not something you want to see. All right, so to our best and worst teams of the sim, where would you like to start?
Let's go good news first. Let's go good news.
All right, you want me or you to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
The for me, there's a couple different ways I could go with this, but for me, the best team of the sim was the St. Louis Cardinals, going 10-2. Again, like we talked about, putting so much more distance between them and the other teams in the division, and they just seem like a real engine chugging forward right now, and not necessarily beating all the best teams at this point, but 10-2 is 10-2. I got to give them the nod.
Hey, I mean, we took 2 out of 3 from the Angels.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember if I said this earlier. I know you and I have said it in conversation. I did not expect my team to be off to this strong of a start. I think we did talk about this. I thought that Cardinals would be like going head to head with all the NL Central teams and kind of beating up on each other. So I'm very thrilled and ecstatic to see what my team has been able to do so far this season. For my best team of the sim, though, I did not choose, even though the Cardinals did have the best record of the sim, I went with a team that not only did very well, but was someone that wasn't on the radar at the it was like a team that was kind of in the middle of everything, not really sticking out at the top of the division, but has now, because of the sim, surged to the top of their division, and that is the Texas Rangers. Now, we just talked about their injury to Demarcus Evans, and that could affect them going forward. But not only did they have a 10-3 sim, but the teams that they beat along the way show that they're back and they're ready to contend again. They are one of 2 teams to have taken a series against the second best record in baseball, Detroit Tigers. They took 2 out of 3 from the Tigers this sim, swept the Chicago White Sox, who was also a contender in the AL Central, and then took 2 out of 3 against Toronto and Oakland. So those, the main fact is they took 2 out of 3 against Detroit, and only 2 teams can say that. Them and Cleveland did it in one series. They took 2 out of 3 in a series in April. All of the other series, Detroit has either split or won their series. So to take a 10-3 record throughout this sim, including against contending teams, going, was it 5-1 against Chicago and Detroit? They're my team of the sim, and has also, like I said, launched themselves into first place in the AL West, as the Angels took a little bit of a tumble. The Astros had a strong sim, but Texas was a little bit stronger. So, worst team of the sim. I'm going to flip my script from last week. Last week, I had the Colorado Rockies as my best team. This week, I have them as my worst team. My big question mark for them was, is their offense first strategy sustainable? We pointed, myself and Cody pointed out that they had one of the best offenses in the league, but one of the worst pitching in the league. And that came to bite them in the butt this time around. They went, what was their record this sim? They went 4-8 this sim, dropped out of first place in the NL West. They did have, oh no, that was the sim before. Never mind. They split against San Francisco and then lost 2 out of 3 against both Arizona and New York, who right now, all 3 of those teams are below 500. Or are the Giants below 500?
I think they're close.
No, they're below 500. They're 18-24. So
Okay.
So all three of these teams that they faced are below 500 teams. So as a division leader, you're expected to win most of those games. They went 4-8 across those games, and now Arizona is not necessarily a bad team. They're just off to maybe a poorer start than people anticipated. So they're still like, okay, you can excuse maybe losing to Arizona, but New York and San Francisco, you gotta beat those teams. I'm sorry, they like, if you just look at their scores, like the scores of the Mets series, they lost 2 out of 3. They lost 14-10, 10-3, and then they won 10-1. Like, these are some crazy high scoring games that they're a part of, because they have such a potent offense, but coupled with a poor pitching staff in terms of performance lately. So you wonder if some of that poor pitching is catching up to them. Now, their excuse me, their FIP is getting a little bit better, so maybe their defense has something to do with their poor pitching, because their FIP is 8th in the NL, but their ERA is last. So maybe some defensive improvements might be on the horizon for them. Maybe it's not just their pitching, but based on their record, they dropped out of first place. They lost against teams that they should have done better against. Rockies are my worst team of the sim.
Yeah, that's a fair choice. I hate to pile on because I know we've mentioned them as a worst team of the sim before, but for me it's the Oakland A's going 2-10 this sim. They've lost 16 of their 19 games in May. They're just on a real downward spiral ever since they kind of got off to a little bit of a decent start there in April. They had a little winning streak going, and then since late April, this team has really bottomed out. Um, hitting just is not there. They've gotten a little bit of decent starting pitching from John Duplantier. He's still leading the way there, but AJ Labus, he's pitched all right, but their bullpen hasn't really helped them at all. Their offense hasn't done much, and that being in that division, they're really going to be looking up at some teams for the remainder of the season. So, I think Steve out there is probably going to start looking to see if there's some guys he can move to build back up some talent and make another run here soon.
Yeah, I was literally just about to make that point. You have uh, stud first baseman Matt Olson. You have Chris Bryant over there. Both of them with expiring contracts. They actually have quite a few contracts coming off the books this year, including, like I said, Olson, Bryant, Sean Murphy would be a good trade piece. Justin Fowler might be a good trade piece. They also have a team option for Josh Bell. This team at this point, now that they've started off like this, you have to think they're in rebuild mode. You have to think that a lot of these contracts are going to be coming off the books. They might be saving for the future. Like that's kind of the Athletics MO or mantra, is they're that Moneyball type team. So you have to think that some of these contracts will come off the books, or they will be able to trade them to some contending teams looking for some upgrades to get some prospects back and start trying to retool. But yeah, they're a 2-10 sim is not something you want to go through. And like you said, they've only won 3 games the entire month of May. That is a struggling team, and you have to think they're going to start moving some of these pieces, try to get some pieces back, because I don't know if they can turn around a month where you only have 3 wins and you're 21 days in. So, all right, moving on to our best players of the sim. I will go ahead and start because I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit. If I had told you that the Cardinals would, with their strong start, they would be leading the NL in home runs, which one I'm surprised about because I play in a pitcher's park, first of all. But not only that, but it's a team with Joe Adell, Anthony Rendon, Matt Wallner, who hit close to 60 home runs last year, and Dominic Aguilera. But none of those 4 were the first player to get to 10 home runs. And in this sim, the first player to get to 10 home runs, because of a strong 6 home run performance across these 12 games that the Cardinals played, that's a home run every 2 games. It's Gunnar Henderson. He is my player of the sim because of mostly because of the home runs that he put up, but not only that. As I'm pulling up my stats here, good. I already had a highlight. He hit 342. He slugged 921 for an OPS of 1.326. Had 12 RBIs, 2 doubles, 6 home runs across the 12 games that the Cardinals played. And I am as shocked as anyone as Gunnar put together this amazing sim to make him the first 10 home run hitter for the St. Louis Cardinals this year. And like I said, we're not a team that's not hitting home runs. We're leading the NL in home runs right now. Now, since then, Matt Wallner has reached the 10 home run plateau, and Dominic Aguilera is close behind with 8. But that Gunnar was leading the team offensively this sim for a team that went 10-2. He is on fire lately, and he's even got a little bit of speed. He's got a couple stolen bases this year, which is something that the Cardinals don't normally do. So to see him doing that is impressive as well. So Gunnar Henderson is my hitter of the sim.
Yeah, it's a strong pick. He's really come in and done the job there. You know, another drafted and developed guy in the Cardinal system. You know, coming up there and making
Well,
an impact.
actually, we traded for him. He was drafted by the
Oh,
Mets. He was a part
oh,
of
okay.
the oh gosh, which trade was it? It was the David Dahl trade where the Mets took David Dahl during the Cardinals' rough season where we ended up almost last in the NL Central, and we got back Gunnar Henderson, Sergio Zamora, and Mitchell Parker. But he actually came over as a third baseman, and he made the transition to second base after the Cardinals signed Anthony Rendon. It's kind of similar to what's happening in real life with Nolan Arenado coming over to the Cardinals and Nolan Gorman having to change positions from third to second. It's pretty much the same thing that's happening, but it's with Henderson and Rendon. But he's made that transition well. He is one of the best offensive second basemen in the league right now. Not the top, but he definitely had one of the strongest sims across baseball.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, you know, I went with we talked about him earlier with his 300th home run. I went with Mookie Betts.
Yep.
Similar performance. He had 7 homers, 18 RBIs, 5 doubles during the sim. Again, really a driving force behind the Red Sox, continuing to sit atop that AL East standings, even with Tampa Bay starting to make a run. I thought he was really outstanding this sim. 7 homers in 12 games, so he kind of blew past that 300 mark with that performance.
Absolutely, and if he keeps putting up sims like that, there's no question he'll get to 400.
Right.
All right, so who you got as your pitcher of the sim?
So my pitcher of the sim, I went with Dwight Keita for the White Sox. Rookie guy coming up. He's performed really well for them, trying to make sure that they can still compete in that power-packed AL Central division there. At a 1.45 ERA and 3 starts, averaged about a strikeout per inning. He's not always necessarily a strikeout guy. For fans, you've heard us reference the 1.0 universe before of eMLB that existed a while back. He was a legend in the 1.0 days. So for longtime fans of eMLB, it's kind of neat seeing him back up in the majors and doing well. But I thought he had a real strong sim there for the White Sox.
Yeah, that's definitely a strong performance, especially across 3 starts. This actually was a tough decision for me because there were a lot of pitchers that performed similarly. Not only with Kaida, you also had John Fran Escalona with 3 appearances. There was one weird appearance where Escalona came in like the second inning and then pitched the rest of the game. It looked like it was like an opener scenario. Thought that was weird, but he put up a great performance. Ethan Knight, once again, consistently putting up great performances. But I went with someone who actually only had 2 starts this sim, but he was scoreless in both of those starts. And guys, I'm looking out because the Pirates are turning this around, and it's in no small part to Carter Stewart of the Pirates, going 2-0, no runs allowed in either start, struck out 12, only give up 1 walk and 8 hits across 14 2/3 innings. You have to tip the cap to someone who can put up scoreless outings back to back. And Carter Stewart did just that for the Pittsburgh Pirates, helping them start to turn the ship around a little bit. They, like I said, they've won 7 out of their last 10. They had a sim finally with above 500 record. They're still sitting at the bottom, but they're looking to make some positive movement, and Carter Stewart was a big part of that this sim. All right, is it that time?
It's that time, I think.
This is my favorite time. I love talking power rankings, and so we're gonna go through the top 10. I'll give you guys a little spoiler. I have 3 teams that are brand new in my top 10 compared to last week's. So that means there are 3 teams that dropped out. So we'll see where that goes. And like I mentioned last week when Cody did the power rankings with me, we'll take what Cody did last week, and whatever JR does this week, we'll make the move positions or drop positions based on what Cody did last week. But JR made his own list. He didn't go based off of Cody's list. So you want me to start or you want to start?
I'll start things off.
All right, number 10.
We'll start number 10. I've got the Nationals here at number 10. They've still had a strong rotation going with Joe Diggs and Noah Murdoch and David Peterson. Those guys are pitching well. Juan Soto hasn't quite kicked it in yet, but I think we all expect him to do that. They've been performing well there in the NL East, and I still see them as a pretty strong team. Especially, they may be one of those teams looking at Travis Berg, and I think bullpen help is probably one of the areas that they're going to look to address. But I see them, moving back toward the top.
So I actually had the Nationals as one of the teams that dropped out of my top 10. I did not think that their performance this sim, going 5-7 and losing the top spot in the NL East, they're like 11-12. They're not like outside the top half of the league. I actually did not put any NL East team on my power rankings because I thought that division as a whole has not been performing well recently. Even the team that took over the top spot, Philadelphia, they only went 7-6 this sim. So my number 10 team is a team on the rise, one of my 3 new teams to the list, and that is the Tampa Bay Rays. 7-5 this sim, but put themselves into second place, trying to close the gap on the Red Sox, quietly putting up good numbers in terms of where they are in the standings. I think they're a team on the rise. They've got a tough matchup with Boston to try to overtake them, but their pitching has been very strong so far. They are tied for second in terms of runs given up in the AL behind the Tigers, who will eventually get to them at some point. Can't have a top 10 without the Tigers. But the Rays, if their offense starts picking it up, they still have a good offense going. They're like top 5 offense, but if it starts getting going even stronger, especially led by Wander Franco, they could make the Red Sox nervous. And so I've got them cracking the top 10 for the first time for me this season at number 10. All right. So number 9 for me is a team that's been a little bit on the downswing lately. I had them ranked pretty high the first week, but they've fallen in 2 straight subsequent weeks. That is the Chicago White Sox. They had a disappointing 5-7 sim. They're around their 3rd place in the AL Central, and with as hot as the Detroit Tigers have been, they're now losing ground on them. They're still a top 10 team for me because they had such a strong start to the season. But lately they've been showing maybe a little bit more about who they are and what their actual performance might be, hovering around that 500 mark. So I do have them down at number 9. They were number 7 for me last week. So if they keep up this, they're probably going to fall out of my top 10 next week. But they're still in it for now because they still have a great record. They still have a good record at 22-19. But if Detroit keeps this up and Chicago keeps playing around 500 ball, they're not going to be considered a top 10 team.
Yeah, and I actually have the White Sox at number 9 on my list also. So I kind of had them in that same spot. Joey Best has been hitting well, slugging away in the middle of the lineup. Adley Rutschman playing well. We talked a little bit about Dwight Keita, but I think they're gonna need some more guys to step up on offense. They're gonna hopefully need to still get some more consistent starting pitching. Kevin Abel and Evan Krasinski, who were former Cardinals that came over, have been pitching okay in the rotation for them, but it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up.
I will say Kevin Abel has been pitching better for the White Sox than he did for the Cardinals. I will say that.
Yeah.
Abel, I was willing to move on from because of his subpar performance, coupled with the great performance of Tanner Burns, and moving him to Chicago in the Stever trade just made sense for me. So he's pitching fairly well. He's got a 2.6 ERA, which is actually really good. And you talked about Dwight Keita having a strong outing these past three starts in this sim. So hopefully those two guys can lead, but the back end of the rotation has some question marks. And like you said, some of their offense has to step up, especially in the outfield. The only outfielder that's hitting well for them is Cabrera Weaver. Everyone else in the outfield is struggling. And so if their outfield can turn it around, they can start climbing back up the standings. But right now, I agree with you that they're a number 9 team, possibly falling out soon. So who you got at number 8?
Number 8, I've got the Angels. I got the Angels there at number 8.
Ooh, that's a big drop for them.
Yeah, they've got some struggles there. Again, we talked about them shuffling their rotation. I think they're really going to need DeGrom and Ohtani to step it up if they're going to be back in that real elite status. They've gotten good production from Maury at catcher and from some of their other talented players, but even though the lineup has slacked off a little bit. So, I still think they're a team that could rise back up quickly, but I had to drop them down a couple of notches there.
All right. Well, for me at number 8, I've got the Cleveland Indians. They dropped a couple spots for me this week as well, because they also put up a sub 500 sim while the Tigers are continuing to have a strong performance. So I kind of kept Cleveland and Chicago around the same area because they had similar performances this sim. They have to be a little bit disappointed of how this sim went. They got swept by Houston, and they're in the middle of a 4-game series against your Reds, and they've lost the first 3. That does not feel good because no offense, but as you mentioned, the Reds are kind of at the bottom, near the bottom of the NL Central right now, and Cleveland, a contending team, is expected to not only win games against them but not lose 3 straight, potentially losing a 4-game series sweep to these Reds. I guess there's something to be said about the Ohio rivalry, right?
The cup. We want the cup.
That's right. But so I did drop them down in my power ranks this week. The only reason I kept them above Chicago is because they still have a better record than Chicago, barely. But they've played 2 fewer games and just have 2 fewer losses. But they definitely did not put up a strong sim. They have a really good balanced team, but they don't have a team that's elite in any area right now. They have just outside top 5 offense, just inside top 5 pitching. And if they're going to make a World Series run, they need to start getting to the elite level, at least in one of those 2 areas. So maybe if we get to the All-Star break and this is a team that's still within striking distance of Detroit or the wild card, this could be another team that can make a move. But they're on a little bit of a downswing lately, especially with this disappointing series against the Reds. So that's why I've got them at number 8. And then number 7 for me is my second team that has cracked the top 10 for the first time, and that is the Houston Astros. Now in second place in the AL West, surpassing the Angels and a game and a half back of Texas. I put them here because we were questioning how their season was going to go after the Sammy Isla injury. We discussed, Cody and I discussed that last week. That's a huge loss to them. But then they come back and win. How many games did they win the sim? They went 9-4 this sim without their stud center fielder. That is impressive. Yeah. That is a big bat and player to lose out of your lineup. But to get these wins, they swept through Cleveland. They won 2 out of 4 against Boston, won 3 out of 4 against Seattle, and so far has split the first 2 games of a 3-game series against Chicago. But that sweep against Cleveland and then winning 2 straight against Boston, they had a 5-game winning streak in here. That is pretty impressive after losing such a key piece to your lineup. So that's why I've got them listed here at number 7.
Yeah, they've been impressive making up for that. I actually at 7 have the Rays, so I've got them a little bit higher than you do. They've won 7 of their last 9. Seems like they're starting to pick things up. Austin Meadows has been on fire. He's really performing well there. And again, I think they're only going to continue to get better as Wander Franco picks things up, and some of the other guys in that lineup do. So I've got the Rays there at 7, and I think they could be due for a real big rise here over the next month or so.
All right, you gonna go on to number 6?
Yeah, so number 6, you mentioned the Astros. That's who I have at number 6. I had them again just a tick higher there. Their pitching is just so deep, both in the starting rotation and the bullpen, that I think that can carry them when they do have an injury like that on offense, or when they have some guys struggling on offense. I mean, you look up and down that rotation, up and down that bullpen, that's just star power up and down, and that's a pitching staff that can really carry them far.
Absolutely. All right, so my number 6, you mentioned them earlier. I have the LA Angels. They definitely fell in my rankings. They were number 4, but I have them here at number 6 for basically all the reasons that you mentioned. I didn't have them falling as far because I still think that team has potential. I just think they hit a little bit of a rough patch. They still have a strong record because of their strong start. 22-18 is definitely a good record when you compare it to the rest of the league, but they have fallen to 3rd place. The only reason I had them above Houston was because I think that they're going to turn this around. They still have a top 3 basically offense minus their on base percentage. They have one of the best power offenses in the league, but I think they're going to turn around their pitching. I think Ohtani and DeGrom are underperforming. They're not playing to what they could be, and I think they're going to figure this out eventually. Maybe Martez is that spark that they need with him being added to the rotation. Definitely a disappointing sim though, now dropping to 3rd in their division, but that's because both Houston and Texas had strong sims, and so I still have them ranked above Houston barely. There's only a half a game difference between the two, so you could have put either one in either spot. But I do have the Angels falling to 6. And then at number 5, I actually have them all 3 in a row. The 3 AL West teams. I've got the Texas Rangers at number 5, cracking the top 10 for the first time. They put up an impressive performance this past sim for sure. I have already talk about them enough as my best team of the sim. But just to put a couple of highlights on it, they are one of the best defensive teams in the league that I didn't touch on that earlier. They have the best defensive efficiency in the AL. They're top 5 in their zone rating. They are also a top 5 offense. And you have to think that coupled with their speed, they also have 36 stolen bases as a team this year. That was their MO last year. And they are continuing to lean into that strength to create more scoring opportunities, and that has led to them being one of the best offenses in the league. They're finally putting it together after a little bit of a slow start. It was around 500 baseball that they had to start with, but this strong sim has jumped them to the top of the AL West, and I think they can keep this up. They might start rising even further in my power rankings if they keep this offensive surge going, coupled with a pretty good defense.
Yeah, this is another spot you and I are on the same page. I've got the Rangers at number 5 as well. All the things you mentioned. They're 13-6 in May, so they've had a really strong month of May here. I have to give a little shout out to my community creative player Jordan Cage, who's playing well at shortstop for them. Contributing to their strong defense that you talked about. And again, there's room for improvement with this team because Jose Merriman hasn't really performed up to his capabilities yet to this point. So you got to figure that he's due for a hot streak here sooner rather than later. So again, there's a lot of talent in that AL West, and the Rangers look really strong.
Absolutely.
Looking ahead, jumping to number 4, I have the Red Sox there. So I've got Boston still hanging up there, toward the top of the rankings. We've touched on Mookie Betts a couple times, and you mentioned James LeBond having, a great season at second base. He's always been considered a strong defender, but he's hitting really well this year also. They had that really strong start and kind of cooled off a little bit, but again here lately, they went 2-2 against the Astros, standing strong against a strong team there. Took 2 out of 3 from Kansas City, who was still playing a little bit of a good ball there. So the Red Sox, I think, still are proven to have some staying power.
I almost put the Red Sox at 4, but actually at number 4, I've got the San Diego Padres. San Diego Padres had also quietly, we haven't really touched on them yet. They had also one of the strongest sims. I almost did what I did last week when I talked about I had 2 worst teams, both from the West divisions in Oakland and LA Dodgers. I almost did the same thing this week when I was talking about Texas and San Diego, both having very similar sims, both from West divisions, both jumping to the top spot. The reason why I put Texas as having the best sim overall is because the Padres schedule was a little bit on the lighter side. They swept the New York Mets. They also lost 3 out of 4 against the Cubs. So it wasn't that series kind of put a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, but they did back it up with a sweep over Milwaukee. Thanks. I appreciate that. And they've won 2 out of 3 against San Francisco, with the third game still yet to be played. So I didn't choose them as my team of the sim, but I do have them ranked higher than Texas in my power rankings because they had a better start to the year than Texas did. When we're talking about power rankings, we're talking about we're not talking about the power rankings of the sim. We're talking about power rankings across the entire year. And so that's why I still have the Padres ahead of them. They're 26-15 right now, which is actually the third best technically record because Boston has one more loss. They played one more game, have one more loss. So technically, yeah, they have the third best, but I still have them at number 4 because they're a little bit on the rise, and they haven't won against as strong competition as Boston has done so far this year. And that leads me into number 3. Staying at number 3 for me are the Boston Red Sox. As you mentioned, they are still playing really well, led by LeBlanc. I do have a player I'd like to highlight, though, that I don't think is getting enough attention, and that is their first baseman, John Switchblade Douglas. First of all, I love that nickname. Being a switch hitter, his nickname is Switchblade. It's fantastic. But this is a guy, last season, made his first major league appearance as a first baseman for the Red Sox. Started 43 games, did not play well at all. He hit .214, he slugged .325, he struck out over 24% of the time, had a negative .5 WAR. This year, he is batting .312, slugging .481, has walked under 20 has struck out under 20%, and has a .8 WAR. This young first baseman has started to seem to figure it out, and he's one of the unsung heroes of that Boston lineup. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about LeBlanc. We're going to talk about Betts. We're going to talk about former Rookie of the Year Danny Diaz. Those are their studs, and those guys are leading the team. But John Douglas is playing a really good, role player role. And he is, batting .340. That is impressive. That is, technically, it's the same average as LeBlanc, but he hasn't played in enough games or hasn't had enough. No, he should have enough at-bats to qualify. Oh, I was looking at the wrong line. He's batting .312. I was looking at James LeBlanc's line because it's first base, second base. My bad. He is second on the team in batting average. He actually has a better batting average than Mookie Betts. So, yeah, it's the Red Sox have a very strong lineup up and down, and their pitching is nothing to sneeze at either. Now, it's not necessarily a dominant pitching, and they've also just lost Pablo Lopez for 2 weeks with an oblique strain. But he's one of the guys at the back end of the rotation. I'm sure they can fill that with a call up or someone from their bullpen. But as I mentioned with the LA Angels, I think the Red Sox are a prime candidate to make a move for a starting pitcher during the trade deadline if they can keep their hot offense going. That adding that starting pitcher might be the key to them staving off the Rays and the Orioles. So I still have them there at number 3 because they might have fallen off a little bit since their extremely hot start in the first 2 weeks of the season, but they're still there as one of the top teams in the league right now.
Yeah, and I just had those two flips. So at 3, I've got the Padres. I did kind of bump them up a little bit higher. Fernando Tatis and Asher Kim really, really outstanding on the left side of that infield. They're carrying that team, and some of their pitching, they don't have a whole lot of name pitchers on that staff, but they're pitching well. Obviously they're in a pitcher's ballpark, so you expect that a little bit out there, but that team is looking solid. I think we all kind of expect that maybe Arizona is going to make a run at some point. That's been their division for a while, but the Padres are doing a good job of staying strong here early on, and they're looking good.
Absolutely.
And so then, if I bump up to number 2, they have the best record in the league, but I do have the Cardinals at number 2 instead of number 1.
All right. Hold on. I'm looking for new co-hosts because I can't have Cody and JR, my NL Central Robbers, in here. They're going to keep disrespecting me like this. What do I got to do to convince you? We've had the best record in baseball the past 2 sims after Boston had the best record the first sim.
If I could remind you, I did have them number 1 in my first power rank.
Okay, then why do you have them lower now?
I really think, spoiler alert, Detroit's my number 1.
Oh, gee. Oh, what a surprise. No, we're going to I'm not going to disrespect the team.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs a little bit with these 2 teams. I think, these 2 teams are right now head and shoulders above the rest of the league for me. And for me, it's a matter of, I feel like Detroit is really hitting their stride. And if you look at the teams just top to bottom, the tiebreaker for me is I do feel like Detroit has a little bit more talent at this point. But I think you could ask me this tomorrow and I might have the Cardinals number 1. So it could go either way.
I mean, it's already been revealed at this point. I have the Cardinals 1 and Detroit 2. I mean, we went 10-2 this last sim. They went 10-3, and we had a better record than them going into this sim. Now they may be, in terms of stats, you could definitely look at that and say, in terms of pitching, they're probably on par with each other. The Cardinals definitely have the best starting rotation in baseball for sure. With two of their starters are the top 2 players in terms of ERA, and Jeremy Frank and Dakota Hudson. But Detroit counters that with the best bullpen in the league. Now, hitting wise, I will grant Detroit right now is hitting better. We've had a couple of players on the Cardinals that have not performed up to their potential. Joe Adell in particular sticks out to me. He is not hitting as well as he did last year. Looks like Matt Wallner is figuring out his form in St. Louis. He's now at that 10 home run mark. And like we mentioned before, Gunnar Henderson has started having a breakout season after this sim. But you have to think, even with all the stats maybe leaning towards Detroit, they still don't have the record that the Cardinals do. And you have to win the games. You can be playing as good as anyone, but if you don't win the games, it's not going to mean anything. So yes, I'm biased. Yes, because I'm the Cardinals manager. That's probably why I have them at number 1. But you have to look at what they've been doing recently. And the Cardinals are just a slight bit better in terms of record than Detroit. They are right up there with them in terms of all the stats. They are almost the best. Well, the only areas of offense that they are not top in the NL in are their batting average and on base percentage, as well as they're a little bit behind. They're second in runs scored, but they're first in everything else except for, we're not going to talk about stolen bases. That's not a key metric in my mind anyway. But they have, like I mentioned, they have allowed the fewest runs in the NL. Detroit, let's see. Let's do a quick comparison here. The Cardinals have allowed 143 runs. The Tigers have allowed 151. So the Cardinals have now overtaken the Tigers as allowing the least number of runs in the league. So it's essentially right now it's 1A and 1B. You could put both of them at the top, honestly, but because I'm the Cardinals GM and because they have the better record, I put them at number 1. Now,
Tigers do have a better run differential, though.
What's that?
The Tigers do have a better run differential, though, if we want to get into stuff like that.
Yeah, because they have they're scoring more runs than the Cardinals are. The Cardinals are allowing the least, but the Tigers are scoring more. So,
yeah, I have a feeling we're going to have this debate quite a bit throughout the season.
You gotta hand it to the Detroit GM. The moves he made this offseason took them from potential contender in the AL Central to potential World Series contender. So you have to tip the cap because they where did they end last year? They made the playoffs, but they weren't the AL Central champions, were they? I can't remember. I gotta look.
I believe they were. I think they ended up winning the AL Central, but in a tight race.
Let's see. They ended. Sometimes OOTP is hard to navigate. Oh no, there it is. Yeah, they did win their division. They won their division at 84 and 78. So, but 84 and 78 is kind of a weak. That was like when the Cardinals won the NL Central 3 seasons ago.
Right.
Like I mentioned earlier, the Cardinals made the playoffs as a wild card team last year with a better record than when they won the Central 2 years prior to that. So, but you have to think that the way that the Tigers are playing, they are easily going to blow that 84 and 78 record out of the water and maybe even get to 100 wins. So we're definitely going to be having this debate all year. And honestly, at this point, I'm putting the Cardinals first just because I'm preparing for the inevitable time where they fall off a cliff. Because my team has done that multiple times throughout the past few years. They have never been able to stay consistently at the top of their game. So I'm preparing myself for when we fall off the top and I can relinquish the top spot because we played badly. But I'm not giving it up as long as we keep playing this way.
I don't blame you for enjoying it while you can.
Exactly. Like I'm fully expecting us to fall off a cliff at some point. And every time a sim goes our way, I'm happily surprised because I'm just waiting for that do a 7-day sim where I go 1-5 or 0-7 or something like that. I'm waiting for it. But anyway, those are our top 10. We kind of did number 1 and number 2 at the same time because it was it definitely is a debate. You can put either team at number 1 and you won't be wrong. It's just a matter of opinion at that point. And obviously I'm biased because I'm the GM of one of those teams. So, I mean, seriously though, can someone other from the NL Central come on this podcast with me? No, I'm completely joking. It's completely valid to put the Tigers at number 1. I'm just going to fight for it because it's my team. So, but those are our top 10 power rankings. And now looking forward to the next sim, we're going to highlight our series that we think are ones to look out for moving forward. JR, do you want to do yours first?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the strength in the AL West. We've got a series coming up. Texas, the Rangers going to Houston to take on the Astros.
Mm-hmm.
Battle of the Lone Star State, battle for the AL West, top 2 teams there. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch each time those guys clash. But especially right now with both of those teams playing well, that could be a fun series.
Yeah, and not only that, I almost pick the series that the Texas Rangers will play next. Their next 2 series are against the Houston Astros and the LA Angels. This is prove it time for the Rangers. Now, I didn't pick that series as my series of the sim, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But if the Rangers can come out of this going 2-1 against each of these teams, that could really start setting them apart from Houston and LA in that division. And it's Houston and LA are both looking to make some strikes against the division leader. So they're going to start beating up on each other a little bit here. But my series of the sim, I'm actually going to move to the AL Central. It's a little bit of a competitive division there. And the two teams that are battling behind Detroit are going to face off, in Cleveland going up against Chicago in Chicago. I think that's a key series because, like I mentioned earlier, both of them are a little bit on the downswing right now. So both of these teams are going to look at this series as a place to turn things around and try to get back in pace with the Tigers, because it doesn't look like the Tigers are slowing down anytime soon. But if you're going to stay in this division, you need to beat your division opponents. And I've talked about that a couple times on the previous podcast. You have to win your interdivision games because those are the ones that will get you to the playoffs. And not only that, Chicago plays after they play a game against, finish off a series against Houston, they play 3 against Kansas City, 3 against Cleveland, and 4 more against Kansas City. So their entire next set of games is going to be against their division. And then Cleveland, not only will they have the White Sox, they will be going against the AL East leading Boston Red Sox after they finish off their game, their series in Cincinnati. And then they follow that up with after they play Boston, they'll play Chicago, then Baltimore, and then they face off against Texas. So this might be a key stretch for both of these teams to try to cement themselves as the contenders to face off against Detroit. But if they start beating up on each other, it could extend Detroit's lead even more.
Yeah, that's the hard thing with the way Detroit's playing. When you're then playing, other teams in your division, you really have to take advantage of that opportunity to try to keep pace and keep those other teams down so that you can focus directly on Detroit and not have to fight over other teams.
Yeah, and looking at Detroit's schedule, they have 2 straight series against division leaders in Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. So it might be a little bit of a rough stretch for them, but honestly, I can see them having no problem handling them. Maybe Tampa Bay gives them a fight, but Philadelphia, they may be leading the AL East, but that entire division is kind of struggling right now overall. So we'll see how the Tigers perform. But yeah, if the Indians and White Sox keep beating up on each other, they can continue to pull away. Well, that about wraps things up for this week's episode of the eMLB Insider Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening / watching us talk about all these topics across the eMLB. Any last thoughts before we sign off for the night, JR?
I'm excited to see where the rest of the season takes us. It was great to be back with you. Can't wait to get our next show.
Yeah, and we are still looking for people to potentially do interviews, maybe even come on and discuss some of the topics that we discuss as a third member of the show. Maybe not for the entire show, because that would make our show probably 3 hours long. As we keep saying, we're going to keep this under an hour. Now, at this point, we are almost at an hour 40. But, but yeah, we would love to have either GMs or community creative players on to do interviews, whether or not you're in the league or a player ready to be drafted. We'd love to do interviews with you guys. Maybe we'll do them as like special one-off episodes so we don't extend the podcast. I don't know. We're still debating that. We're still in the planning stages. But reach out to either of us if you want to participate for sure. And next week we should be back to our regular schedule in terms of we should be able to have a Sunday. Well, we have a sim on Friday. Due to the different schedule this week. But then we follow that up with a Sunday, Monday, Wednesday week. And so the podcast will be recorded after that Wednesday sim. So we will cover the Friday sim plus all of the sims for next week, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday. And that episode will be up before the next Sunday's Coffee with the Commish. Probably on Saturday is when those will go live. So you guys have plenty of time to watch that before getting into the next sim. But until next time, guys, this has been AnjouPays and
Jay Rollins.
Jay Rollins. You go JR, Jay Rollins, either one.
I'm flexible.
Flexible. Thank you once again for tuning in. And I really don't know. I feel like my sign-offs are horrible. Do you have a better way of signing off? You want to sign us off this week?
Until the next time you want to go inside eMLB, we'll see ya.
Much better. Take care.